wholly automated purchase, Tim. The Joker's placed money in stocks in the school's vending machines.
The dastardly fiend. We have to stop him, Paul, before he corrupts the students. But first...
What?
I'm going to go buy a Dr. Pepper. Do you want anything?
To the bat poles!
Welcome to the Bat Poles, the show that the Sandman uses as a sleep aid. This is Tim in Tokyo with my brother Paul in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Snore.
Our theme version this time is from a fourth grade string orchestra. The YouTube notes don't tell us who or where. It was recorded June 11th, 2008, apparently.
Details have been withheld to protect the guilty.
It's from a YouTube channel called, it's a mess of letters, WERMEJBMMELOVIOLA. So there's viola there at the end, but the rest of it, I don't know.
Egypt EDF.
So, yeah, you as you could hear, the kids, I mean, it's like 20 kids, and they're all playing exactly the same part, but the melody is mostly on a piano, which sounds as if it's being played by an adult. We can't see that.
Well, maybe not the melody, but just the main track. I guess arguably the melody is what the kids are playing on their violins. Batman. But the piano is the bass part, effectively. It's a lot better than it could be.
Right. Well, yeah, this is fourth grade, but, the first thing I thought of was how we made fun of the junior high orchestra when we were in high school.
Yes. We had it easy. Our instruments played the note that, you press the key and it plays the note if you got your mouth in the right position. But with violins, you don't even have frets to work with.
Yeah, well, one of the YouTube commenters wrote, "Why are you guys so out of tune?" And I was like, come on, it's hard for a little kid to play violin and get the notes right. They're always going to be off, unless they're like Suzuki Method or something, and they're like superhuman violin players.
Yeah, since violins don't have frets, it takes a long time to get used to where exactly your fingers need to go to make the right notes. So give these kids a break. Fourth grade is about as young as most non-Suzuki kids learn how to play stringed instruments.
Man.
And they're doing this in the service of Batman, so they get extra points for that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this time we are talking about the script. Actually, it has a name for Part 2 as well as Part 1. The Two-Faced Counterfeit and the Counterfeit Counterfoiled by Peter Rabe, however you want to pronounce it. Now, of course, Lorenzo Semple Jr. turned this story into The Joker's Last Laugh, and we'll discuss that first draft script next time. So we're going to just concentrate on the Two-Face script here. Rabe got a story credit for that Joker arc, but it's kind of like what we've seen with other early drafts where Part 1 has kind of the outline of the same story, but Part 2 is utterly different.
Yeah, and I wound up doing too much research for this particular podcast episode. I read both scripts and watched the arc again and realized that I didn't remember anything about the last 2/3 of the second episode of the arc. Not a thing. It was as if I'd never seen it before, let alone read the script. It was bizarre. But, just about Peter Rabe, or Rabe, if we want to, name him after a baby broccoli dish. According to the Batpole's blog that is not related to this podcast or not affiliated, I don't remember what you're...
not related. That was the usual line. Yes.
Not related to this podcast.
Of course, we always, I would always change it up sometimes, but yeah, go on.
Oh, yeah, just trying to make sure that I get the catchphrase correct. They have this to say about Peter Rabe, and this is one of the two guys who chats about episodes on this blog. The most intriguing aspect of this episode, he writes, to this vintage paperback collector is that Lorenzo Semple Jr. based his teleplay on a story by ace crime fiction writer Peter Rabe, 1921-1990. Rabe wrote several classic novels for the paperback publisher Gold Medal in the 1950s and 60s, including Stop This Man, 1955, Kill the Boss Goodbye, 1956, Blood on the Desert, 1958, Anatomy of a Killer, 1960, and The Box, 1962. Rabe's Murder Me for Nickels, 1960, about the jukebox rackets of the 50s, is in my top 20 crime novels of all time. For obvious reasons, when those of us who celebrate the old-time writers get together, Rabe's work on Batman never comes up. So, this was a man who had, I think, only one other screen credit on IMDb, and it was from a show that I didn't even recognize and had never heard of. It might have been a 50s anthology show. But he did have a pretty healthy, if not lucrative, career as a paperback crime novelist.
Okay. So this Two-Face story, so he seems to be building it around the idea of Gresham's law. So in the opening scene, it's just as in what was broadcast, there's discussion of like Dick's studies of economics, but it's a completely different discussion. And talking about Gresham's law, which is bad money tends to drive good money out of circulation. And I said, okay, well, what does that mean? So I looked it up. So the example is like if you have some coins, two different types of coins that are of equal monetary value, but one set is made of a more valuable metal than the other. The valuable ones, the more valuable metal will be hoarded, and people will use the lower value metal as the currency.
I see.
So the bad money, the money that's made of lower grade materials, becomes the currency, and people keep the good stuff.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. It's like, zinc pennies driving copper pennies out of circulation, and, silver alloy, or not even silver really, but whatever, quarters and $50 pieces are made of now, if there are any $50 pieces left. The pre-1964 got driven out of circulation because they were purer. They actually had some silver in them.
Yeah, so everybody kept them.
Right.
And then probably took them to a coin dealer and got disappointed when they were worth like $1.
Yeah, more valuable doesn't necessarily mean valuable in some, some broader sense.
But still, I didn't quite see how that applied to this story. So, just as in the broadcast version, we've got money that is, quote unquote, counterfeit on one side and real on the other, if that could be possible. But yeah, I had trouble kind of making that fit to this story. Now, there is a useful, later on in the script, and we'll kind of go through it here. I'm having to use my PDF, so I can't flip around in it like I could if I had printed out pages in front of me. But yeah, later on in the story, there is it's all kind of laid out what Two-Face's plot was concerning the money. But I still had trouble applying that to Gresham's law.
Well, there might be something symbolic about it having to do with Two-Face himself. Considering this is an introduction to Two-Face, and Rabe or whomever, asked Rabe to write a script about Two-Face, to use him as the villain, seem to be trying to establish something about his good side versus his evil side. Like, bad runs out good. That is certainly what happens with Two-Face himself, is that his evil side makes his good side, it's hard for the good side to survive. And in fact, a couple of times, his good side seems to be trying to reform itself, and yet, the bad money drives it out. That is, the negative criminal side of Two-Face takes over and ensures that he doesn't do the right thing. Until the very end, when he seems to be split in a different way, but we'll get to that as we go.
Yeah. And just to tease it a little bit here, there were several points in this that reminded me of our discussion of implausibility from our previous episode.
Do tell.
So, well, yeah, as we get to those, I'll mention them.
Okay.
So, as usual, the script has some handwriting on it, some from Howie Horowitz, some from Charles Hoffman. The Horowitz stuff tends to be a little bigger and often written at an angle. Hoffman's is a little tighter script. Well, as I've had to do repeatedly, I asked High C, because he seems to have a hold on it, and I keep forgetting every time we finish a script. But he sent me a sample. I think it was... of course, the treatment for Siren.
Good Siren drives out bad.
And on that one, Hoffman writes in like a thicker pen, and it's almost impossible to read because he writes so tightly. Okay, so we've got, the list of characters at the front, and then the beginning of part 1. Now, this first scene, it's kind of the same idea as what's broadcast, but what's broadcast is much simpler.
Outside the Gotham City National Bank, wealthy young socialite Miranda Fleece is about to perform an act of charity.
Begging your pardon, ma'am, if you don't mind hearing a tale of some real bad luck.
I know how it goes, Poopsie. Say no more. Have 100.
Heaven bless you.
Help! Police! Buzz!
Where, like, this rich woman who is, like, giving handouts to, some money to a bum, and then it turns out to be counterfeit, at least on one side. But the version in Rabe's script is, like, unnecessarily kind of involved, where, this prominent man, Mr. Bottomham, comes out of a jewelry store, and it turns out that he has bought something with one of these half counterfeit bills, and the jeweler gets a police. Does he ride on the policeman's motorcycle?
He does.
Yeah, I just can just see that happening in real life. I'm sure that's not a violation of regulations. But so there's a whole kind of chase scene of Bottomham, and it gives these characters too much importance. And, I was expecting Bottomham to be, a recurring character in this arc, and he's not. He's never heard from again. So I could see why Semple simplified it.
He simplified it, in other words.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. This we could perhaps attribute this to the fact that Rabe was a novelist, first and foremost, and only wrote a couple of script treatments for television shows during his career. So he's, giving us more background information, because he can, and not thinking so much about the timing or the expense.
Yes. Well, as we've seen, some of the regular scriptwriters had trouble sometimes thinking about the expense of what they were proposing to do.
Oh, sure. So, it might not be fair to attribute this choice to Rabe's other job, his day job, but still, it put me in the mind of that.
But it reminds me of, now that you mention it, the same problem that you sometimes see when a novelist writes comics, because they'll put in too many words. You'll have these big dialogue balloons and
big narration boxes.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a 1963 Spider-Man issue with text all over the place. But they're not used to writing comics and having pictures there, and this might be a similar problem.
Could be.
So we have as you might remember from the broadcast version, Gordon and O'Hara talking about, more counterfeit money being passed. And so we got to call Batman because that's how they solve every problem. Let's call Batman.
Yes, as we well know. And that gets translated in Semple's script into a line that in which Gordon says, once again we bring our pork cracked pitcher to the Caped Crusaders' door. And I'm yes, they finally acknowledge.
Or isn't it?
Yeah, they finally acknowledge our everything that we've known about the GCPD for ages. So the counterfeit bills that are counterfeit on one side and real on the other, it's interesting that aspect of the counterfeiting came all the way through to the Joker script in its final form, because it's a great Two-Face idea. And even the notion of it being quote unquote real on one side or authentic on one side, fits very nicely. It's a crazy way to talk about counterfeit money, since it's counterfeit through and through, since it wasn't published by the the U.S. Treasury or printed by the U.S. Treasury. But it's an interesting reminder, even into the present day, and the episode that we actually have on film of where this script started.
Yeah, it is odd that Semple kept it, even though it's a much better Two-Face bit than Joker bit.
Yeah, it just becomes one of Joker's antics in this kind of generic way, rather than having a thematic connection to the villain, as it initially did in Rabe's treatment. Mm-hmm. I should call it a script. It's not just a treatment. It's a draft, but nevertheless it is complete.
Script, yes.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
The Law of Equivalent Exchange, a chapter-by-chapter look at the manga Fullmetal Alchemist, is now in its own podcast feed and coming out twice a month. Patrick and I analyze how creator Hiromu Arakawa masterfully put together the story of Edward and Alphonse Elric, with commentary on the story, the art, and the translation. What are we missing from the original Japanese? Even translation of the sound effects can be a bit tricky. Look for The Law of Equivalent Exchange in Apple Podcasts or wherever you find podcasts.
And so then we're at Wayne Manor, and as I mentioned, the discussion about Gresham's Law as Dick is studying economics. So then, of course, there's the bat phone call, and I was wondering, whoever, maybe Horowitz, crossed out a bunch of this. And then there's an inserted page with a different exchange between Aunt Harriet and Alfred after Bruce and Dick leave. But I was wondering what was wrong with what was crossed out. As Bruce and Dick are jumping up to go to the study, Aunt Harriet says, "But you did not finish with this law," talking about Gresham's law. Dick, "But we will, Aunt Harriet." Bruce, "Yes, because all matters of lawfulness deserve our constant attention." I wondered if that might have been a little bit too suggestive of his being Batman. Kind of blowing his secret identity. And then on the next page, Aunt Harriet says, "He says things so well, Alfred, indeed, and no matter in what capacity, he does them even better." Which is kind of, I don't know, kind of flat to me.
Yeah, and the inserted page wound up not making it into Semple's script either, where Aunt Harriet says, "Such dedication and such energy. Bruce is a fine influence on Dick, and I couldn't be more pleased." And Alfred says, "Yes, Mrs. Cooper, the days of youth are indeed the days of glory." That sounds more like a first season necessity to, say something about why, Aunt Harriet and Dick are living with Bruce in the first place. Why Bruce is a good guardian for his, for this particular ward.
Yeah, I wonder when this was written. There's no date on it, but it does feel like Rabe is probably cribbing off of season 1 episodes.
Right. Kind of just try to sketch out the characters' relationships in a, quick and easy, but, still significant way. But again, it's not necessary to the script as it's, moving forward.
But then the Bruce and Dick taking the bat phone call is so perfunctory here. It needs something more. It's just, "Yes, Commissioner, we'll be right there," to the bat poles. Gordon doesn't even get to say anything on camera.
Well, maybe that's because so much time had been taken up with all this dialogue, the yammering between Harriet and Alfred that's originally in the script. Yes, and the car chase, and the counterfeit passer getting on the back of the motorcycle cop's motorcycle, etc., etc. Gosh, Tim, this is going to be a really long podcast. We're through about page 5 at this point.
Okay, so Batman and Robin are in Gordon's office. And I think I didn't compare closely. I don't think it's too much different from what was broadcast.
Not particularly.
Gresham's Law gets brought up again, though, just to kind of drive that point home. But I had my note here, I'm not convinced Gresham's Law applies here. And there's a note from somebody. It's diagonal, so it might be Horowitz. "I think some of this should be trimmed. Ought to get into action earlier in part 1. Well, we already had a car chase. Batman wasn't involved in it, but or Two-Face for that matter. Oh, and now, as written here, the scene ends with Batman's talking about Gordon saying, "Where will you start to catch your fish?" And Batman says, "Fishing from the bank, Commissioner." And I think that was a little too subtle. Semple changed it to "from a shady bank."
Yeah, the best place to fish, which is, at least, true-ish among fishermen, finding a place in the shade, a cooler spot in a lake or pond is a good place to fish.
But I think it's a better line, and you don't miss it. I felt like this was so subtle, I'm not sure that I would have caught what the pun was if it's just "from the bank." But "from a shady bank," then, shady has a double meaning there. Right.
And also the joke has some back and forth, where it poses a question and then gives an answer. So there's more time there's more kind of mental room for the audience to get a bead on what Batman is actually saying.
So then we're in Two-Face's lair, and he has 4 robots, not just the 2 you see in Joker's hideout. And he has a mole named Facilia, which is that supposed to be derived from face?
Which I think means ease or easy, and if it were, if it really is a Latin word.
Okay.
So he has an easy maul. Yeah, that's not going to make it past the censors.
Yeah, and she calls him Toofy.
Yes. Yes, which sounds like a baby's reference to teeth, rather than referring to Two-Face. But here, reading the script, suddenly when I found that the robots' names are Horace, Helmut, Hank, and Herbert, when the first one turns out to be named Helmut, I couldn't get Kraftwerk out of my mind for the entire rest of the script. We are the robots, do 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 do. We are the robots, do 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 do. Yes, they certainly are.
Viled.
Yeah, very viled. And then the reference to the roving robot recorder, which I think makes it into the final episode. That is the device that Joker and Facilia in this script used to track the robots.
Well, Two-Face and Facilia.
Two-Face, right? Two-Face and Facilia use. The roving robot recorder, RRR, reminded me of RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots, which is the name of the first play ever written and actually where the word robot was invented. It was a play about robots. Mm-hmm. Czechoslovakian play, I believe. So anyway,
yeah,
there's Kraftwerk wasn't around until 1969, but gall darn it, they may as well be in this episode, since in the final version they're all made up, pasty white with plastic-looking hair, just like the Kraftwerk guys were 10 years later.
So Two-Face, he's wearing baggy tweeds on one side, and more nice formal wear on the other side. Now, I was confused about tweed here. I didn't look into it, but when I hear tweed, I think of like university professor wear a suit, which sounded nice to me, but tweed is portrayed in the script as looking bad.
I think it's not as formal, and remember, this was a time when even informally, men tended to wear suit jackets and even ties. There were, different levels of formality between a work suit and a leisure suit, so to speak. So I think tweed is considered, down the class ladder from worsted wool, or at least in terms of what it signifies about, whether you're at work or at play.
And so the nice side of Two-Face speaks, is verbose and formal, and the tweed side is colloquial and speaks, in short sentences. Mm-hmm. And he'll like switch from one to the other, start out something like initially he says, "Gently, my sweet Facilia, none of your clumsiness."
Okay.
And so Facilia doesn't like the robots. She's creeped out by them.
That's probably because they always went to far and far and far enough their Autobahn. in the Joker-mobile, no less. Far and far and far enough their Autobahn. Sorry, Kraftwerk is on my mind and it will not leave.
Well, maybe they should take the Trans-Europe Express instead.
Yes, it would be faster.
And he has one of them like put on a Watusi record, and Two-Face is dancing with Facilia.
Yes, and there's even a Kraftwerk line for that. We're functioning automatic and we are dancing mechanic. That's also from We Are the Robots.
So, yeah, they're using the RRR, the roving robot recorder, to watch what's going on at the bank with the robot that's there. And, of course, this is very familiar from the Joker's Last Laugh.
Right, including the collar button gag.
Yeah. And Batman and Robin are there, talking with the... Well, so, of course, he was Mr. F. Flam in Semple's version. He's just called Vice President here. And so, okay, on script page 11, it's PDF page 15, I believe this is Hoffman saying from very start of this project, I couldn't believe nobody else would recognize Hubert as a robot, and I still can't. So Hoffman is having trouble accepting the implausibility that nobody would recognize robots. And I mean, like, that's the only implausibility in Batman that you're objecting to?
Yes, that's a good question. Although, as it turns out in the script as filmed, I suppose it would be, possible not to recognize him as a robot if you weren't already in on it. But nevertheless, that does seem like a strange place to, point out an implausibility.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's Hubert the robot instead of Mr. Glee. Mm-hmm. And there's a similar discussion here about Batman asking he had references. Mm-hmm. And noting the perfection of how he counts money. Batman and Robin are.
I wonder if calling the vice president F Flam, as in Flim Flam, makes him seem even goofier and less trustworthy, and so it's fine for him not to recognize the robot as a robot. But just a thought.
I mean, clearly Semple. I mean, if you give a character the name Mr. F Flam, it suggests that he's not the best there is at what he does.
It also suggests you shouldn't hire him as your bank manager.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Bruce Wayne needs to do some house cleaning.
Definitely. If they haven't fired anybody or, changed personnel since 1951 before the head teller walked off and disappeared at lunchtime and sent back this robot, then maybe you should be looking into your hiring practices more generally.
Now, I thought it was interesting that Semple changes this collar button gag in that, as Rabe wrote it, so Two-Face and Facilia are looking through the lens, and then Two-Face says, "Yow, that bat person touched the viewing lens." And then we see Batman's side with his finger on the collar button, where, as broadcast, he touches the collar button first, and then Joker and Josie react to it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Glee. I'm Batman. Obviously, sir. I've been admiring your collar button.
Wow! Oh, the filthy bat creature touched the lens.
Right, there's an immediate cutaway.
And I felt like maybe Semple's version is a little clearer to the viewer.
Sure. More effective too. The notion of it being a jab that Joker and Josie experience as being basically right in their eye.
Yeah.
That's communicated more effectively by cutting away directly to Joker and Josie.
I mean, I'm sure I've seen things in film where somebody is reacting to something and then you see what they're reacting to, but I think switching it around works better in this case.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Not quite sure why, but Batman still tells a super funny joke.
Batman told him a super funny joke. When the creature didn't laugh, that was proof.
Yeah, I'm trying, but I still can't find it super funny. The guys over at the To the Badpools blog said that they wonder if they're androids because they didn't laugh at the super funny joke either. Which doesn't change from here, basically doesn't change from here until the final filmed version.
Yeah, it's basically the same joke. Do you know why a collar button is like a heavy type of smoke? They both choke. Now, instead of Robin characterizing it as a super funny joke, Batman says, "I told him a rather amusing joke." Mm-hmm. Which is, that's a little bit, selling it a little less hard, but still it's overstating it, I think.
Calling it a joke is overstating it.
Yeah. I said something that wasn't funny, and because he didn't laugh, he must be a robot. Now, then we go into this whole bit about, so the teller who disappeared, I think, as Semple did it, the teller had gone to lunch and sent the replacement. Here, the teller just disappeared and turns out to have been locked in the vault. And So there's several pages here of Batman working to free this person from the vault who we have never seen. And so to me, it felt like the stakes were not as high as they should be. And it's also using up a lot of time. So I think, no way that it would have made it to the screen.
Yeah, I agree. It's much more economical in Semple's version.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really part of Two-Face's plot to any great degree. It's just something on the side. So,
well, it may establish something about Batman's knowledge of robotomy, as it's called on page 16. Yes, I'd rather have a robot in front of me than have to have a frontal robotomy. I love that word. Thank you, Randy Hanslick, MD, or Dr. Rock, for putting that earworm in my head. I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than have to have a frontal robotomy. I'm sorry that word didn't make it into the final script.
Yeah, we need that in the lexicon.
No, that's a joke.
That's a super funny joke.
Well, it must be because we're laughing. Only we get to judge what's funny.
I'm still laughing.
No, Dr. Demento is an important part of our childhood, along with SCTV and the Batman show. So, we find out a little bit later, don't we, that according to Rabe's script, Two-Face was an actor.
Right,
and around page 17, Shakespeare starts showing up, everywhere.
Yeah, he's not Harvey Dent, the district attorney. Mm-hmm. He's an actor, and he's quoting Shakespeare. So, the comics purists probably wouldn't have been happy about that.
I suppose not, but I wonder why he's an actor, according to Ray. But I suppose it's got something to do with, once again, split personality. Mm-hmm. It's a reasonable profession or a related profession to his psychotic affliction, for him to be playing the parts of others, playing roles, and having to memorize the lines of those roles. It's a way of making his split personality even more pronounced. So at the top of page 17, he says, "Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave you are," which is a reversal of one of Hamlet's soliloquies from Act 2, Scene 2. "Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I." That's the soliloquy that ends with "the play's the thing to catch the conscience of the king." There's the Shakespeare, and it's mostly Shakespeare references, run from the obscure to the really familiar. But that one's a slightly more obscure one.
So, yeah, Semple cut all this rescue from the vault. He does add Batman scolding the bank president, Mr. Flam, for not monitoring his personnel carefully enough and picking out the robots among them. So it's an example, I think, of civic responsibility Batman wanting everybody to be equally as responsible.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's always
not only to themselves, but to others.
It's always good to see civic responsibility Batman again.
For sure.
Two-Face is upset because Hubert died. Yeah, he cries out "murder most foul" when... That's Shakespearean too, isn't it?
It is, I believe. Not sure if that's from Hamlet or from Macbeth, but it's definitely in there somewhere. Might even be from one of the history plays.
I know, my first thought was Agatha Christie, but...
yeah, well, she knew her Shakespeare, too.
So then, we have the same bit as with the Joker, where the bank teller robot has a tracer in it, and the villain... tries to follow the Batmobile to the Batcave and is tricked into instead finding a miniature Batcave. That's, not precisely the same, but it's very, very similar.
Right. And it's a great visual gag, too. When we talk about Semple's script, well, we can talk a bit about how it works out in the show. Oh, by the way, "murder most foul" is a line spoken by Hamlet's father, the ghost of Hamlet's father in the first act.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah, the ghosts. So, yeah, and where Batman is is explaining many years ago when he was a brilliant actor and inventor of special effects, before he went strangely mad and became a super criminal. There's a note, probably put this earlier in scene with Gordon and O'Hara. So
as we are introducing a new heavy.
It's hard to read. As we are introducing a new heavy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's page 18 of the script. So needs to be a little sooner. Yeah. In Gordon's office would seem to be the kind of place where you would get that information.
Right. Although I can see why Rabe would have put that bit here, since, Two-Face has now spent 2 whole script pages declaiming using Shakespeare, including saying, "Alas, poor Hubert, I knew him well." I don't need to tell you what play that's from. So here, to have the scene follow immediately, in which Batman tells Gordon of Two-Face's past as an actor, it makes sense script-wise, but it's more important for Horowitz and company to introduce that stuff early on with Gordon.
Mm-hmm. Two-Face has a Toothmobile, which I thought should be driven by our guest from the Nora Clavicle episode. Tooth. Does he drive the Toothmobile? Although it's spelled Toof mobile. Mm-hmm. And so it's a car with 2 hoods. You can drive it in either direction. It's got 2 steering wheels, which reminded me of a car that, I don't know if you would remember this, back when we lived in Centerville at the Pancake Day Parade in September. The Shriners would drive a car like this. Mm-hmm. Although I actually asked about it on the Centerville Facebook page, and actually got somebody had a photo of one of these cars, but it was a little bit different from what Rabe is imagining. It's like the 2 drivers are sitting side by side facing opposite directions. But this has got like 2 separate front seats. And so I wrote in my notes, would Greenway Productions borrow this car from the Shriners? I mean, you're not going to...
From Zagazig. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or else are you going to get Barris to design another car for 1 episode? I don't think so.
Did Barris design the Joker-mobile?
No. What? Well, remember... Oh, yeah, now I remember what we researched from before. That car was originally for an Elvis movie.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And they re-outfitted it to be the Joker-mobile.
Mm-hmm. Yes, complete with shag fur, or shag rug on the interior. Really ugly.
So, then in the Batcave, we have the line, "We are dealing with a perfectly normal robot." So that's pretty much intact in Semple's version. Mm-hmm. Now, this is where it really starts to veer off in a different direction. So Alfred notices something about the suit, but it's not the inks on the suit.
Nor the extreme pressing that's given to the suit that pushes the buttons nearly all the way through.
So it's a little unclear what he does notice. He says, if I may venture to observe, sir, the material seems more unusual than the robot. So just the material is unusual for a suit. Mm-hmm. And so then there is analysis of the cloth, and it has, let's see.
Rabbit and aluminum.
Yeah, it's made of rabbit and aluminum. 50% organic, 50% inorganic. 2 opposites. Mm-hmm. Perhaps not coincidentally, the very nature of Mr. Two-Face himself, says Alfred. Then they figure out where it came from, Wolf and Warp Mills. So that's where they head, rather than to Penthouse Publishing. So they're at a clothing store.
Right, they actually go to Tog Furnishings, TF,
right.
Holy Sartorials, Robin says on page 26, TF like in Two-Face. And that's where they end up going, and the connection, according to Robin and Batman's dialogue on the way is that, Batman says, remember his theatrical backgrounds, costumes, disguises, clothes. And so that's how they justify that the front is a clothing store or a haberdasher.
Right. So they talk with Facilia in the clothing shop. Facilia is, so she's recommending that they should get something really de rigueur. I mean, if you want to be with it. And she holds up some preposterous mod version of an Edwardian suit. Robin, disapproving. With that, Facilia, it's the scene, boy wonderful. I mean, if you don't want to dress like a square, she indicates the duo's clothing, then this is what's happening. Batman, as a matter of fact, we prefer clothing that's less outlandish. Yeah, we shouldn't wish to attract attention.
Yep. Yeah, Rob seemed to understand some of the, aspects of the show's humor quite well.
Yeah. And he has to consult the haberdasher himself, who isn't there. So when Batman and Robin go outside, Batman is pedagogic, it says. There are no female haberdashers, Robin. And I wrote, no? Why does a haberdasher have to be a man?
It's like, what did did they check in his pants like they did or check in her pants like they did with Gordon, just to make certain that she wasn't a haberdasher?
And the substitution of a female for a male, Robin, is a typical Two-Face maneuver. It feels like a stretch to me, but
that's a stretch. Yeah, the stretch is it's a perfectly Batman maneuver.
So there is a bat climb.
With a possible cameo annotated by, apparently, Horowitz.
Right. Yeah, interestingly, in Joker's Last Laugh, there is no... Well, I guess the only bat climb is made by Alfred.
Right, Alfred wearing the Batman costume.
Well, I guess Robin does climb, but we don't see him doing the climb. He just appears at the window.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no cameo in that episode, that arc. Batman and Robin confront Two-Face. There's a fight with the robots. A couple of references to hell, which it's probably Hoffman has circled with a question mark next to them. So I wrote, call the censor. Because, that was
right here.
That was one of the things that Hoffman was always on the lookout for. Like, what are we going to be able to get through? And anything that was remotely religious, he would mark out. Anything, any reference to God or hell or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a fight. And so the robots, on the control for the robots, there are various settings. Asleep, weak, athletic, super strength, and watch out. Which feels like a Batman thing, but I was wondering, why would you ever want to use the weaker settings? Yeah, I'm going to set it for weak. That'll be really useful for me.
Well, perhaps if you want it to be gentle and pick something up that requires some, finesse. I don't know.
I suppose so.
Wait a minute. Why are we trying to make this plausible?
So, now, this death trap, I found it a little too something, a little too scary for this show.
Yeah, I think, was it High C who made a similar comment in discussing this script?
Possibly. I haven't looked at anybody's comments yet. I'm holding off until next time.
Yeah, I believe it was High C who said that this just seemed too threatening and too dangerous. Putting the Egghead episode in which Bruce Wayne is put into a brain scrambler is pushing it a little bit, I believe he said, but this is basically using a giant dentist drill. Not so sure.
They're strapped to surgical tables. Two-Face says, "Too bad you did not have their super strength. However, my better side prevails. You shall have superpower, but within my power." Confidential grin. "Once I replace your brains with the power pack." So he's got a drill. He's going to open up their heads, take out their brains, and put in what? Robot brains. Power pack.
which will not cause death in between the two, I guess.
Yeah, of course
between
not.
the two stages of being or not being.
Yeah, so where are Hoffman's objections to implausibility now?
Oh, death, where is thy sting-a-ling-a-ling? I'm reminded of what a comment that someone made on one of the comics historians or comics fans boards on Facebook about a Sal Buscema drawn Hulk Hostess Fruit Pies ad in a late 70s comic book, in which Hulk wraps up a couple of thugs in like basically a road. He rolls up cement or concrete as though it were a rug around these guys and basically, smashes them flat. There's no way you could survive that. And someone has drawn in splashes of blood coming out, squirting out as these thugs are being wrapped up in the rug/road. And this person, published to Facebook and cited it with something like, Hulk kills two guys to get a Hostess fruit pie. Yeah, a little bit too. Somebody should have pulled the plug on that one too.
Yeah. Now I didn't notice until I was going through it myself that there were 2 page 33s. I think what happened was that the person at Laramie, who scanned this, she found it necessary to scan it into 2 files, which I put together into one, but I think she had the same page at the end of one file and the beginning of the next one.
I see.
And I've left it in my version just so that the PDF page numbering remains the same as what the listeners might be following along with.
Got it.
It is in the show notes as usual. And so this is the end of part 1, and Rabe has written a recap here, which has been circled with the note longer and better, and certainly some of them are not very good. The last one with Brain Drill on Batman is just, oh no.
Find out in part 2. That's a leftover from Tim's and my old Timothy and Paul funny books.
Yeah, I mean, that's so undescriptive. Just, oh no. I mean, I the Bat recaps in the first season and a half of the show, they were never so bland.
That sucks.
Another dish. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that just reminds us that some of the lines that made it into the recaps weren't so hot either.
But the ladies were hot. Anyway. Still threatening him with the drill. Any last words, Batman? Or, as Rabe originally wrote it, any last words as a human being? Which, as a human being, has been crossed out, and Batman is written there instead. So Batman asks for a glass of water,
which Two-Face hilariously calls creek juice.
Yeah, I had that circled. Creek juice.
I'm going to have to call it that to my 11-year-old son and see what he says. I think he'd probably enjoy that.
Go down to the creek and brush your teeth with some creek juice.
Grab a couple of rocks while you're at it so we can have some fresh squeezed creek juice tomorrow morning for breakfast.
Yeah, well, so, yeah, then he spills some of the water on the floor, pretending that it was an accident, and Two-Face says, your operating table manners are terrible. So, and he watches as the water reaches Two-Face's feet, and then copper cable, which is connected to the robot controller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then then the bottom of the robot power machine, it says. So spilled water on the floor has already touched Two-Face's feet. It's continuing to snake its way towards the cable. And so you kind of get what he's planning to do here. So Two-Face, conveniently fumfers a bit. Well, are we ready? I think I'll part right here. It's such sweet sorrow. And as he
More
turns
Shakespeare.
more Shakespeare. Turns on the drill. No sooner does it start to whir when it goes bang. Full on Two-Face. The pistol grip in his hand starts to smoke. The drill stops. Two-Face stands shivering with electricity. He drops the drill and howls. So he gets the attention of the robots. The robot power machine emits a billow of smoke. Clearly visible, the power handle sinks smoothly from superpower to asleep with an expiring sound. So then Batman and Robin break out of their restraints. And Batman says, I had noted earlier how the floor slants toward the power machine, perhaps at a Dutch angle.
Yes, making everything slide.
They are in the villain's hideout.
Yes, that's true.
It might have been an intentional bit there by Rabe, noting how the villains' hideouts were always shot.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of self-referential joke. Two-Face and Facilia take off. Batman and Robin go down the bat rope. Now, this part was confounding to me. Batman reaches into cockpit for radio bat phone. Suddenly, sound like growing hurricane. The duo stands about in bewilderment. Interior of cellar, day. Intense sound of wind. Two-Face stands in front of a cold furnace. What's a cold furnace? The gaping door is labeled Bank Draft Dispenser. Okay, that's a pun. He is energetically shoveling money from a large pile of the stuff into the furnace opening. Facilia helps by tossing an individual bill, which is instantly sucked up by the draft, in rhythm with his shoveling. Two-Face, the quality of money will be strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven.
Quality of mercy, more Shakespeare.
The duo near the Batmobile as before, now looking up. Individual paper bills are drifting down around them. What they see, visible over the line of a roof, is a chimney which is spewing a veritable cascade of paper money into the sky. This view is accompanied by intensified roaring sound. Robin, Two-Face seems to have money to burn. Batman, so someone has written here, that's just it, he's not burning it. What Rabe wrote was, when that counterfeit comes down over the city, the monetary crisis will be complete.
This is awfully complicated.
Yes.
It might not have been complicated as they, in just in plot terms if they'd shot it, but just the mechanics of it and the special effect of making money blow through the sky, I don't know. It just seems, kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, and so what is Two-Face attempting to do here? He's attempting to distribute counterfeit money that people will try to use as real money?
Mm-hmm, I guess so.
Now, yeah, when that counterfeit comes down over the city, the monetary crisis will be complete. So this strikes me as more, now this is typical of Batman, but implausibility. So will it really be a monetary crisis if it just affects Gotham City?
Well, the money will start to circulate elsewhere once it goes to Gotham City merchants, I suppose.
I guess, but I mean, it's kind of the same as Louis the Lilac trying to corner the jewelry market just in Gotham City.
Yeah, so the counterfeit perfume market. Yes, perfume. The perfume market.
I mean, that's yeah, you're really going to get rich off of one city's perfume market.
Maybe Rabe started with the line from Merchant of Venice, the quality of mercy is not strained, it droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven, and decided he was going to, have Two-Face say that and make the money drop from heaven. The quality of money will be strained, right? Clever reversal there by replacing mercy with money and then saying, rather than it not be strained, that it will be. So, maybe it's just a darling that needed to be offed.
So, let's see. Batman calls Gordon. Thank heaven you called, Batman. In your absence, there has developed a terrible run on the Gotham City Bank. Batman, speaking of heaven, there is worse to come. Gordon, what? Listens, turns to window. Yes, I can see it drifting down. Still in the building? I will send the necessary men immediately. Batman. In the meantime, I will contact Bruce Wayne and urge him to make a public statement regarding any stabilizing steps his bank might take in the public interest. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's an odd way of distributing counterfeit money that people will, for some reason, think is real and try to use.
Well, if you saw, hundreds of thousands of dollars falling out of the sky, you'd probably try to grab some of it, too. And maybe not ask any questions about its legitimacy. You might think, maybe it, got ejected from a plane when they were, meaning to eject, I don't know, solid waste.
Yeah, so on script page 40, about halfway down, so Batman and Robin have gone back to the Batcave, gone up the Bat poles. They're in the study, and there's a big question mark here drawn by Horowitz or Hoffman. Dick and Bruce come racing from the Bat poles past the surprised Alfred, who is just answering the Bat phone. He holds it out, is waved off. Bruce, I know, we're on our way. I have a question mark about that one, too. I'm not quite sure what's supposed to be happening here. So why is Bruce turning down a Bat phone call? I mean, he just talked to Gordon. Mm-hmm. And
it appears to be a call to Bruce Wayne. Not a Bat phone call.
Right. That's what I was thinking, too. I mean, Rabe says it's the Bat phone, but I think that was an error.
I do, too.
Because, Gordon said he was going to try to call Bruce about making an announcement, which, of course, Batman has already told him because he is Batman. Mm-hmm. So I think the problem there is that Rabe wrote Bat phone when he didn't mean to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so, too. And then Bruce makes his announcement in which he directly addresses the viewer.
Yeah. In order to stem this money panic, I urge you to turn in all counterfeit bills which you now hold in your possession. My bank will give you a receipt for the counterfeit you turn in. Tomorrow, after stocking sufficient funds in our vaults, my bank will exchange your receipts for an equivalent amount in good and honest money. Now, wait a minute. Because, I mean, they just got free counterfeit money from the sky, and they're supposed to be able to turn it in for real money?
Brilliant. So basically, you're laundering. Bruce Wayne is offered to launder Two-Face's counterfeit money publicly.
Yeah.
Talk about blackmail material.
And Two-Face is laughing, just as I planned. Facilia, baby, are you thinking of all that money that's going to be in that bank a little later? So Bruce's bank is going to be building up all this real money to, quote-unquote, reimburse the people who have counterfeit money. And
yeah, if it's not actually reimbursement, is it just imbursement?
I guess. Yeah.
But why don't Two-Face and Facilia just accumulate a lot of their own counterfeit money, disguise themselves, and go and turn it in?
Yeah, they don't need to give it to anybody else now. They could just
it wouldn't even be criminal behavior.
Just print out some more and then go in with a Mack truck full of fake bills and come out with a Mack truck full of real bills.
Exactly.
Bills. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so more Shakespeare, the play's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then several cops in O'Hara are strung out in front of the building. O'Hara bellows.
They've all got needles and tourniquets.
Well, O'Hara always acts a little strung out anyway.
That's certainly true.
O'Hara bellows at the building with a bullhorn. Now hear this. It's Chief O'Hara speaking. It is. I don't think he would say it is, the Irish thing, when he's making an announcement like this, like with a bullhorn.
Well, he is Chief O'Hara. What I don't understand is why does a man with a bullhorn voice need a bullhorn? Has he ever spoken at anything below the loudest possible volume he could achieve?
Yeah, so I didn't really buy the it is there. But anyway, fire the tear gas, he orders. And so Horace the robot comes out of the shop. Okay, this is at the haberdasher shop. But he's been made up to look like Two-Face. And so, of course, doesn't react to the tear gas because he's a robot. And so O'Hara doesn't quite get it. He says, now that's what I call a super criminal, because Yeah, how come you aren't crying? Horace, in Two-Face's funereal voiceover, I am beyond tears. I give up.
I think that's another Shakespeare line, but I couldn't find where it's from.
And meanwhile, in the margins, Hoffman, perhaps, is saying, again, wouldn't anyone recognize Horace as a robot?
Well, apparently he would. The program just to do, anything you want us to do. We are the robots. I told you I couldn't get it out of my head.
Yeah. So O'Hara tries to arrest him. He tries to get the others to arrest him. Put the cuffs on him and off you go. O'Hara briefly looks after Horace is being led to the police car, then he's alerted by the accelerating sound of a car. He turns. Emerging from around the corner of the building and heading away from the camera is the Toothmobile. Naturally, it looks immediately as if it were going backwards. Back to O'Hara. Astonishment, then grimness as he heads for his own cruiser. O'Hara, I'll handle this meself. So he's chasing the Toothmobile. The car stops and he approaches it and talks to Facilia, who calls him Chieftain, which kind of throws him off. Young lady, are you aware that the fact that such a procedure is strictly against, that it's quite contrary to the manufacturer's recommendation? Why would the police stop you for that? Is that a fact? But you mean it's quite all right if I go forward? She crushes gears. O'Hara jumps back. Yeah, O'Hara, yes, once I'm out of the way. So what's hilarious about this is I thought I
Gordon's
circled it.
response.
Oh yeah, Gordon. Bruce, something wrong, Commissioner? Gordon, yes. Incredible as it might seem, Two-Face has outwitted Chief O'Hara. And I wrote, Rabe is certainly in on the joke here.
Yes, credible as it might seem.
Predictable as it might seem.
Indeed.
Bruce and Dick figure out that when Two-Face said that he was going to Gotham City Park, but he must have really meant that he was going to Gotham Park City, which is an amusement park.
What a cruddy name for an amusement park.
Yeah, it's another kind of a stretch. Just, it has to be reversed because it's Two-Face, so we'll just switch around the words and have a nonsensical name for an amusement park.
Yes, I'd much rather go to Detroit Rock City myself.
The top of page 47, there's a note. From here to the bottom of page 51,
yes.
We have an action/comedy routine that has underlined nothing at all to do with Two-Face's overall plot.
Good call.
Yeah, and it's just, running around the amusement park in the Hall of Mirrors, and yeah, I mean, it's another thing I felt like it might have worked in a novel, but for this TV show to spend all this time in this cul-de-sac, it doesn't work.
It might also have worked in an episode of Benny Hill Street Blues. That's an SCTV reference, by the way. Benny Hill Street Blues.
Oh,
with
that's
Dave
right.
Thomas as Benny Hill, as the Benny Hill figure.
Now, there was a nice pun in here on page 48. They're going into the House of Mirrors, and Batman says, "Now don't let the mirrors fool you. Reflect before you act."
Hardy, har, yes. Probably a little too willfully funny for the for the Semple and Batman.
At least it's not so subtle that it would go right past you.
Yes, I suppose. But those are the campy ones, or those are the ones that, speak to the adults but not the kids.
So there's all this stuff in the Hall of Mirrors.
Which involves a plastic water pistol that Batman pulls out of his utility belt to short-circuit the robots so easily that it's a wonder that the robots don't fry out every time they step near a water puddle or the weather gets a little humid.
So, confrontation between Batman and Two-Face.
I wonder if the reason why this isn't crossed out is that, Horowitz or whoever wrote that comment about the uselessness of this scene just figured, kind of threw his hands up and thought, to heck with it. We'll just, we'll throw all of this out. There wasn't anything left to keep, even to keep.
Yeah. So Batman appeals to Two-Face's good side and seems to get him to talk him into giving up. And the three of them walk out. Well, I think one of the robots walking out with them too. But then when they get outside and Facilia's out there, then Two-Face reverts to bad Two-Face.
Right, on 52, Batman says, no one can help you, whereas your show of kindness will be matched by the mercy which tempers the law. Two-Face thinks then, Two-Face, it's a bargain? And Batman says, no, it's simple justice. And so Two-Face then, seems to relent, but as you say, when he sees Facilia again, he reverses. So his good side is appealed to, but then plot drops out again and gives way to the evil side.
Yeah, and so I think they take off here in the Tooth-mobile, and the Batmobile is chasing them.
Which means there's yet another beat to the plot.
Yes. I feel like both of these parts are too long. But of course that's been typical of a lot of the scripts.
Sure. Right, and this is when we move into Robin being brain washed and manipulated.
Well, yeah, to simplify it, so Batman realizes that Robin has been given, what did they call it? Lie serum rather than truth serum?
Yes, that's right.
By the way, did you notice what a terrible speller Rabe is?
I didn't particularly, but...
and, Hoffman is dutifully fixing all the spelling. But on page 55, so there's this whole thing about how Robin loves potato soup. And they're back at Wayne Manor, or at the Batcave, I guess, and Alfred is offering his favorite potato soup, and he refuses it. And every single instance of potato has an E at the end. And,
oh my!
And I wrote paging Dan Quayle.
I was going to say, holy Dan Quayle, Batman! Tomato soup.
Right. So it's lie serum, and Batman gives him an antidote, I think. And then he's all excited about the potato soup.
Yes, Batman says to Robin, you don't want to take this when he gives him the antidote. And Robin says, yes, I do. It's that easy. Today is opposite day. Do you want me to hit you? Yes. No, I mean, yes. That, I believe, is from an old Calvin and Hobbes strip. Anyway.
And so Robin, remembers still what the plot was supposed to be. And Two-Face is planning to rob Gotham City Bank. Here's the point where Batman outlines what the plot has been. Phase 1, undermine the currency. This is page 58. Phase 2, cause all the money to be pulled in for reimbursement. Phase 3, steal the tremendous accumulation of good money, which has now been placed in the vault in preparation for tomorrow's distribution. Okay, the reference to good money. So this is supposed to be Gresham's Law.
Right.
So the good money is being replaced by bad money because Two-Face is going to steal the good money?
So what's going to happen to the counterfeit if he steals all the good money and no one will have a chance to be, quote-unquote, reimbursed for turning in their bad money? Again, I think this has got to do with Two-Face himself. It's a thematic, symbolic connection to Two-Face's bad driving out the good. It's way too precious, but I can see where it's coming from. It's got to be insisted upon, even if it doesn't quite actually fit the plot.
So Alfred to Robin, but what was to be your function during this heist? Robin, in my trustworthy identity as Robin, I would find out just exactly where the real money was stashed, and during the robbery I would stand guard. I would convince any possible police who might come along that you, nods at Batman, and I are shifting the money for safekeeping. Batman, brilliant, but regrettably not good.
Good, bad, see? Get it?
So Gordon happens to call. Batman says, have if you and some of your men will meet me tonight in the vaults of Gotham City Bank. So then Robin is at the bank when Two-Face arrives. Two-Face thinks that he's still under the influence of the lie serum. And so, first the test. Your name is Robin. Robin. No. Two-Face. You are Little Red Riding Hood. Robin. That's right. Two-Face beams. Lead us to the vault. So they're going
that was easy and foolproof, right? As tests go.
As they're on their way to the vault, so O'Hara and Gordon are observing from opposite sides, so they see opposite sides of Two-Face. O'Hara says, "What a sloppy-looking character," and Gordon says, "And to think that he is such a refined-looking gentleman." Two-Face. Robin, now sing, my little bird. In which safe is the counterfeit? Robin, pointing left. In this one. Two-Face. And in which is the real money? Robin, pointing right. In that one. Two-Face. Marvelous. Therefore, the real money is in this one. Two-Face turns to the left safe, which is where Robin has said that the fake money is. So he thinks that since Robin has under lie serum, that he would point to the wrong one as having the real money. So Two-Face goes into the left safe and gets a bag of money, but of course it's actually counterfeit money.
Right.
Gordon, I still think we should stop him now. Batman, no, I have a better lesson planned for him. He will come back when... Gordon, startled. I say there. Batman, instantly alert. I didn't plan for this. Now that didn't sound to me like a Batman line at all. I didn't plan this. It sounds like he's giving up too much control here, if he says it that way. I mean, Batman would, of course, sometimes things happen that he didn't plan, but maybe he would just say "Great Scott" or something.
Yeah, that's true. Admitting that he might not have planned something, which does happen in the final version of the show as shot when Bruce Wayne gets slapped into a straitjacket. Something he didn't plan does end up happening, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
So what happens is, as Two-Face's group runs for the exit, Hank is dragging the unwilling Robin along with super strength. So they drive away with Robin, but he catches up, and Two-Face says, "And when I get out of prison, Cape Crusader, I will know where the money is hidden and how to spend it," because he's planning to hide this money. But Batman says, "A bag of worthless counterfeit?" Two-Face stares. Batman, Robin is no longer under the influence of your lie serum. You picked the wrong safe because Robin told the truth. And Two-Face is angry and quoting Shakespeare, "When I fall like Lucifer, never to hope again." Do you know what that's from?
No, I don't, actually.
I'm assuming it's Shakespeare because everything else was, but...
Yeah, well, when I get mad, I always quote Shakespeare, too, so I can really identify with Two-Face.
Yeah, so that wraps it up. Two-Face is led away. The tag scene is at Warden Crichton's office, although the Crichton is handwritten in. Rabe just said it was the warden's office. So with I guess this is maybe Horowitz's notes. Bruce, as president of Gotham City's League for the Rehabilitation of Supercriminals, I am naturally interested in the progress of Two-Face, Warden Crichton. Crichton, excellent progress, Mr. Wayne. I have asked for him to be sent to this office so you can see for yourself. Dick, is he still running the prison's theatrical workshop? Crichton, not only that, he has organized our new tailor facilities. They make individualized prison garb. So Two-Face comes in, and he's wearing all white, it appears, as a new prison uniform. But then when he turns around, we see that the back is all black and has a spiked devil's tail.
I like that. I do like that. And by the way, when he falls like Lucifer is from Shakespeare's Henry VIII.
Okay.
Act 3, Scene 2, in fact.
Okay. So that's the end of Rabe's Two-Face script.
Okay, so the autopsy.
Well,
I guess we've largely expressed what we think about the script as we go.
Yeah, it goes off on tangents in places, and some of the stuff just doesn't quite make sense. The bit with the spewing fake money all over town, in particular.
Yeah. It strikes me, that gag strikes me as being somehow more season 1-like, if it were actually to happen. But it's just not necessary enough to the script, I suppose, to have fit even in, the giant umbrella kind of, Bill Finger flavor of the first season. But I do miss the Two-Face possibility. I kind of mourn the fact that Two-Face never became a villain in the original 66 series, and had to be kind of retrofitted onto the franchise when William Shatner played him in the animated adventure that we have discussed on the podcast already. So the possibilities of having half and half costume, which we see on Tommy Lee Jones in Batman and Robin. Is it Batman and Robin?
No, Batman Forever.
It's Batman Forever, the Val Kilmer Batman. Some version of that could have been a lot of fun in 66, but it also might have been extremely difficult to shoot, especially with the gags shooting one side of him, from one member of the GCPD's point of view and one side of him from the other. Lots of complexity there that would have just made things, tougher, especially as their budget was declining during season 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did have the thought that Two-Face might have just been a little too difficult to do. Now, of course, there were 2 attempts, right? Because there was the Harlan Ellison treatment that eventually got turned into a comic book.
The Garcia Lopez drawn Batman comic book that adapted that script that we've talked about, I think, on
Deconstructing Comics.
Deconstructing Comics a really long time ago.
Yeah. So, yeah, interesting. So,
yeah, no. One thing that we'll be thinking about when we talk about the Semple first, well, actually, it's not the final draft of the script that we have. It's an early draft that has some significant differences from the way that the Semple screenplay from the Semple teleplay that was actually shot. We'll talk more about how elements of Two-Face, still kind of squeeze their way into the final version, even though it's not a Two-Face story any longer by that time.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
Coming up, some results of our listener survey and the Bat Inbox. Help support To the Bat Polls and all the Deconstructing Comics shows with a monthly donation to the Deconstructing Comics Patreon page at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. All our patrons get outtakes from every To the Bat Polls episode. For $4 per month, you can get in on additional full-length content, including an issue-by-issue look at The Amazing Spider-Man by Lee and Ditko, and discussion of most of the MCU movies. You'll also get the right to have an ad for your own project on the show once a month. And later in the show today, we'll be announcing some upcoming additional perks to being a patron, so stay tuned. Go to patreon.com/deconcomics and select the level of your monthly donation. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support.
You're on with Stan Ross.
Good morning, Mr. Ross.
Good morning, Joe.
Why 2 half-hour shows a week, Wednesday and Thursdays, I think it was? Why not just 1 hour?
It harkened back to the old Saturday chapters, the episodes they used to do on Saturday mornings when they had 14 or 15 episodes, and it was a hook into the next day. If you recall, at the halfway point of every Batman show, there was this tremendous pickle that we put Batman and Robin in, and we wanted the audience to come back in and see if they could get out of it. Some of those pickles, I'll give you a good example. In one of them, the Shame one, I wrote a pickle where they were in the middle of an old western town. They were staked out on the street, and 1,000 head of cattle were coming up to them. And I couldn't figure out how to get them out of it. And I presented it to my son. Our son Andy was 6 years old at the time. And I said, Andy, how would you get out of this? And he came up with the solution. And so I wrote what he told me. So,
what was the solution?
The solution was that Batman and Robin are staked out, and they're on the ground in the middle of this western town. And he said, doesn't it make sense, Dad, that Batman might, the rumbling of the cows might cause Batman to just get one arm free? I said, yeah. He said, and then he could untie his leg. Then he stands up, takes off his cape, and goes, Olé! And the cows go right past him. And he was right.
Oh, I always thought they went for red capes, Batman.
Merely an affectation, Robin. Something to make the corridas seem more colorful. Actually, bulls are colorblind. They react to movement, not to color.
Holy Toreador.
Well, the word is matador, Robin. Toreador is a word of convenience used by Bizet in his classic opera Carmen.
Holy Matador, then.
Very apt.
So I want to say thanks so much to everyone who responded to our listener survey. We appreciate so many of you taking the time to let us know what you think. Of course, all anybody ever gets in response to this kind of thing is a small sliver of the total audience, but the sliver that we got was a bit bigger than I'd expected.
Good news.
Yeah, so I just want to share a few highlights of the results. Most of the respondents either heard about our podcast on the 66 message board, the all-seeing, all-knowing, or from other. So some other source that I didn't come up with to make a checkbox for. I'm interested in what other might be. Of course,
it's a very large category.
A lot of the podcasts I listen to, I just happened to hear about. I should have had on another podcast as one of the choices. Might have heard, maybe people heard an ad on Deconstructing Comics, maybe, I don't know. Or, people hear about stuff in all kinds of different ways. So,
did you have a category for Facebook posts?
I did. Only a couple of people Facebook, and nobody Twitter. And a couple from friends. The vast majority of our listeners are what John S. Drew calls syndication babies. They first saw Batman syndicated on a local TV station. We had only one who had seen it in first run. I thought that there might be a few more.
I'm sure there are. They just didn't respond to the survey.
Favorite Batman episodes or arcs? I've got a lot of different answers. The two most popular were the Zodiac Crimes and the Perfect Crime. So, yeah, those are perennial favorites. Podcast topics. In case somebody who's listening didn't look at the survey, there was a list of possible topics, and people could check very interested, somewhat, or not interested. And I set up a spreadsheet where a very interested answer got 2 points, a somewhat got 1 point, and a not interested was -1. So using that system, the leader was, not surprisingly, Scripps, with 40.
Wow, okay.
Second place was Women of Season 2 with 38. Costumes in the show got 37. Mr. Freeze Focus, 35. Race on the Batman show, 34. Adam West Naked, the DVD release from some time ago, got 30. Also, Batman and Star Trek casting overlaps got 30. The All Batman issue of Cinefantastique magazine from February 1994, 29. 1970s Power Records Batman, 26. So those were the most popular ones. So we're going to have to get to all those at some point.
Okay, well, I've got a Power record ready to rip.
The Batman and Rubin comedy album by Alan and Rossi got 9.
Okay.
But what was interesting about it was that the number of people who weren't at all interested only slightly beat out the number who were very interested, with almost no votes for somewhat. So that was the most polarizing topic on the list.
Well, it's interesting. That's very interesting. I have found a copy of the LP, which I'm going to digitize so that Tim and I can share it. Because I don't believe it's available. It might be, it might be on YouTube somewhere. But I just thought, because I am something of a collector of these things, I thought I might as well have a copy, and I can play the record and digitize it. But what I've been reading about it is that it kind of stinks. It's not very funny. So perhaps others have heard that as well, and maybe we'll find some, some redeeming quality to it. Even so.
Well, I think it's probably going to be something we don't spend a lot of time on. Maybe do it alongside an issue of the comic or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting for other historical reasons, too, one of which is that Bob Kane claims to have, quote-unquote, created it, as though he wrote the script. But, he also didn't even paint those stupid clown paintings he was exhibiting near the end of his... near relatively close to the end of his career.
Speaking of Batman 66 comics, they got 20 points.
Okay.
So, kind of in the middle. So there's a fair amount of interest, but not as much as some of the other things.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised that none of the cartoon series that I listed did all that well. So I had included the 68 Filmation Batman, the 1977 Filmation Batman, Batman the Animated Series, and The Brave and the Bold.
Mm-hmm.
The one that did the best... Now, I gave options of either an overview of the series, which would take a lot of prep, or an episode-by-episode run-through. So, episode-by-episode, the animated series that got the most votes was Batman the Animated Series with 21. Versus 15 for Brave and the Bold, 12 for 1968 Filmation, and 10 for 1977 Filmation, which kind of surprised me because West and Ward are voicing that one, but I guess that's trumped by the presence of Batmite.
Well, yes. Is negative Trump possible?
I mean, that was certainly, when we watched it in 77, I remember that we were not crazy about Batmite, and we were not aware of Batmite's presence in comics. We thought that Filmation made him up. But
right, we thought he was kind of a Fred Silverman insertion. We need Dynamite. That's what this thing is missing. If we were to do Batman the Animated Series, we could do season by season instead of attempting to do, an overview of the entire series since it's so gigantic. Doing an overview of one of the two Filmation series would not be so difficult because they're not nearly as, there aren't nearly as many episodes. I wonder if John Drew's episode by episode rundowns of the Filmation series have kind of obviated the need for anyone else to hear more such episode by episode rundowns of the old Filmation series.
For an overview, Filmation 68 and Batman the Animated Series both got 28.
Oh, okay.
77 Filmation 24 for an overview, and Brave and the Bold overview 22. But
okay.
Yeah, for an episode-by-episode, Batman the Animated Series was the clear leader.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we could try to do a season by season, depending on how many episodes there are in a season.
Yeah, well, I think it would be worth our time and the listeners' time, too, to do at least the first season that way and see whether we feel that it's connected enough. Or it can be, developed enough in terms of the 66 show and what we know about it to determine whether we should continue with it.
Yeah, I mean, that was why it surprised me that Batman the Animated Series had the most interest, because I didn't think it was all that related to the 66 series, where, the 68 Filmation, I mean, I haven't really watched it, but I know that it's very much indebted to the live-action show. And, of course, West and Ward are in the 77 one. So I thought that those would be, of more interest. But I guess the Batman the Animated Series is better. I mean, I don't have much experience with it, but it has a stronger fan base, I guess.
Definitely. And, if we follow the lead of Will Brooker, who's written a number of academic books about Batman and about comics, every iteration of Batman refers back, even if it doesn't do so consciously, to all the other iterations of Batman comics, movies, cartoons, and all of that. So, they're part and parcel of the same kind of, the same meta text that is Batman. So, from an academic perspective, of course, Batman, the animated series, is related somehow to Batman 66. But I guess our, question will be, how directly or indirectly, can we talk about that relationship?
Favorite episode of our podcast gets lots of different answers. The only ones that got more than one vote were our talk with Oscar Lilly in episode 108, got 3 votes.
Nice.
And our discussion of Burt Ward's memoir in episode 88 got 2 votes. I guess they enjoyed our roasting of it. I don't know.
I guess so. Yes, I can't unthink that cover of that book. It's just get out of my mind, get out of my memory.
We appreciate that the overwhelming majority of you said that we are knowledgeable about the series, and that the
could have fooled me,
and that the show is still interesting, even though we finished going through the 66 series.
Yes, so, that's good to hear. It gives Tim and me a chance to talk to each other at least twice a month, which we might not do otherwise, which would be a shame. So we're glad to have the excuse.
And as I've said before, once we finished going through the series, then we could finally start doing the podcast. Because once we had the whole thing kind of fresher in our minds. Although I think we'd kind of forgotten season 1 by the time we finished season 3.
Yes, and right now season 2 is a total blank for me now that we finished the series.
But we're dipping in here and there with the scripts. At a season 2 episode next time. I was surprised that the age of our listeners is a wider range than I thought. To be sure, a plurality are in the 45 to 54 group. And
which is also where we are.
Yeah, well, I'm beyond 54 now.
It's okay to lie about your age, Tim.
A majority are between 45 and 64. But a couple were actually in the 15 to 24 age group. So we're corrupting the youth, I guess.
I was going to say. That was exactly the phrase I was going to turn.
Now, stupidly, I forgot to ask for gender. But
oh, Tim. Oh, man. Well, I didn't have any involvement in writing the survey, so I can't complain.
Those who gave their names were clearly all male, which wasn't the least bit surprising. Because the people we hear from regularly are pretty much all male. We haven't heard from Lord Deathman lately, who we know to be female. But yeah, pretty much anybody else we ever hear from is male. I think didn't we once get an email from another woman?
We did.
It's been a while ago. So yeah,
the ever elusive
female listeners, please let us know you're out there.
Yes, we want to make sure that we're speaking to everyone, not just, old syndication babies like ourselves.
Now, I don't know what this says. Maybe shouldn't even speculate, but the vast majority of our listeners have no kids. And single had a slight majority over married.
Okay.
So, draw your own conclusions. But thanks for all the suggestions for possible episodes. I'm not going to go through them here because I haven't really sifted through them yet, and I haven't shown them to Paul yet at all. But we'll be looking through them. Also, there were some suggestions for angles we could take for a Joker episode and for how to improve our show. So we'll be considering those.
Fantastic. Yes, thanks to everyone for responding. It's really helpful to us.
And if you kept meaning to take the survey and never got around to it, it's still there. So if you check the link in the show notes for either episode 156 or 157, it's in both of those. So click that, and we'll still be happy to hear from more of you. Bat Inbox. From the message board, since everyone had already commented on the script Batman Meets His Match, featuring Dr. Kabbalah without Dr. Cassandra, it was mostly high C. So I assembled some of the highlights of what he wrote here.
Okay, this is from IC, or these are from IC, although I won't be demarcating among the different emails that Tim has stitched together here. From the call sheets I've seen, and I suspect the moderators could back me up on this based on paperwork, rehearsals and read-throughs were pretty much non-existent on the Batman 66 show, given that the Bat shooting schedule was super tight. As soon as the footage for one episode was in the can, the next episode began shooting, and many times, as Adam and Bert often discussed, 2 arcs could be shooting simultaneously. As for who was doing on-set rewrites, I suspect Charles Hoffman factored into that, yeah, I do too, and perhaps even Stanley Ralph Ross himself. I mean, he talks about being on set quite often, plus, let's face it, with his bombastic personality, it seems he often ran roughshod over Hoffman anyway. My guess on that throwaway joke about a, quote, financial institution so conservative it pays no interest at all, end quote, is that maybe Hoffman actually crossed out the joke and Horowitz resuscitated it. It's hard to imagine Stanley Ralph Ross ever crossing out a joke. Fair enough.
Truer words were never spoken.
Yep. Also, fun recap of the career of Angelique Pettyjohn, whose life unfortunately was cut short way too soon by cancer. I think she would have made an interesting henchmal. She loved to tell the story of how when she interviewed for the truck part, which is described in the script as an, quote, Amazon, she informed the producers that at 5'6" she was no Amazon. They laughed and said that standing next to Shatner, she would look like one. Yes, he was quite a shorty pants. I would post a screen grab of her costume on the show, but this is a family site. Well, I saw it when I was 11 or 12 on, black and white TV, and it didn't stunt my growth. Suffice it to say the material was similar and perhaps the same as Joan Collins' costume on Our Favorite Show, and the color was the same. The only difference was that Angelique's costume provided even less coverage, so to speak.
Then in the email, Jeff Culligan, in honor of your new episode, here's my Kabbalah minifigure. He definitely looks too young. I may have to paint his hairpiece gray. Dr. Cassandra is still under construction. So, yeah, this is a certain... is this like a Lego person?
Yep, it's a Lego minifigure. Minifigure is the official trademarked name of Lego's little people.
I see. Okay. Yeah, cool.
So, yeah, it's well done. Nice tux. I wonder if that came from a Bruce Wayne minifigure, perhaps.
So I'll put that picture in the show notes, and also the picture with this next one from Martin Noreau, which I apologize for letting sit in the hopper for so long. Hello, Tim and Paul. I really enjoyed this week's show. Doing a cleanup today and found this, and of course I thought of you two. It's a picture of the Batman Viewmaster packet next to a coffee cup with the photo of Lee Merriweather Catwoman on it.
Yep. And did you notice this Viewmaster packet is apparently Canadian because it says Showtime / L'Heure de Spectacle, and stereo picture is translated as image Image Stereo. So yeah, I'm guessing that was probably bought in Canada. But otherwise, it looks just like the ViewMaster packet that we had. There is an earlier edition of the ViewMaster packet from the 60s that has less modernized-looking typeface as well. I've seen that on eBay before, but the picture is the same. So yeah, that's the same ViewMaster that I got signed by, or Tim got signed, I think, by.
No, I think you did.
No, I got Adam West to sign a drawing that I did of Batman in a tiny little notebook. And he asked how I wanted it signed, and I just said Paul. And that's exactly what he wrote. So it's not even to Paul, it's just Paul Batman. That's how Adam West signed it at that car show in 1977. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, the Batman logo is not translated into French. If it were in German, wouldn't it say Deflatermausmensch?
I don't know. Let's ask the psychiatrist from the Semple version of the Two-Face / Joker script that we just read.
So, we're planning to start letting patrons vote for which of maybe 3 or 4 topics they most want us to talk about. So we're going to have to discuss what would be on that list. Probably some things from the survey and maybe some things that weren't in the survey. Yep. And we're also going to try to get back into doing some short videos on Patreon. If you send us questions, we'll answer them. But if you don't send us questions, I've been working on some TV trivia questions to throw at Paul and the patrons. So if you'd like to get in on that, please support us at patreon.com/deconcomics.
Groovy.
And as we said, next time we'll talk about the first draft of The Joker's Last Laugh by Lorenzo Semple, based on the Peter Rabe Two-Face script we just discussed. So we'll see you again in 2 weeks at the same Bat RSS feed. Check the show notes for the video for the 4th grade orchestra version of the Batman theme, Peter Rabe's Two-Face script, and the photos we talked about in the Bat Inbox segment. Thanks to Chris Cavanaugh for this episode's Bat audio. We're always looking for more Bat audio clips to play in the slot before the Bat Inbox. If you have some we haven't used yet, send them to batpulls@deconstructingcomics.com. You can hear outtakes from this and every episode of To the Batpulls by supporting us at patreon.com/deconcomics. You can also help us out by shopping via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon, by sharing our episodes on your social media, and by subscribing to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And spread the word. Let all your friends who are Batman 66 fans know about the show. Send us your comments at batpulls@deconstructingcomics.com or tweet us at deconcomics. You can also leave a comment on this post at tothebatpulls.libsyn.com or on the all-seeing, all-knowing 66 Batman message board. What you're hearing now is The Robots by Kraftwerk. Next time, Lorenzo Semple adapts the two-faced Counterfeit into The Joker's Last Laugh. Our comments on Semple's first draft. Everyone stay safe, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. To the Batpulls is a production of deconstructingcomics.com.